Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for Arthritis Talks, Gluten and Arthritis. I'm Dr. Sean Bevan, Chief Science Officer at Arthritis Society Canada. We've come together for this event from many different places, but first I would like to acknowledge the land on which I am located on and where the Toronto office stands. And this is the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabeg, Huron-Wendat, and Haudenosaunee Indigenous peoples. Today, this meeting place is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and I am so grateful to have the opportunity to work and live on this land with my family. Now, September is Arthritis Awareness Month, and before we dive into tonight's webinar on gluten and arthritis, we are so pleased to have Diana Gazdar, one of the real faces of arthritis we are featuring this month, join us to chat just very briefly about her own experience with rheumatoid arthritis. Diana is a valued member of our National Council, as well as an executive at Medline Canada. So with that, welcome, Diana.
Thank you, Sean, and hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to join you tonight and be a part of the Arthritis Society Canada. Like many of you, I really know the pain of arthritis. It struck me when I was 33 years old and expecting my first child. The pain was so bad, there were days I just couldn't even hold my daughter. I couldn't nurse her, I couldn't change her, I couldn't dress her or bathe her. I missed so many moments of joy in being a brand new mom. Soon after I delivered, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. RA stole so many precious moments from me, and I have had to adapt my life significantly ever since. Arthritis impacts every facet of my life. It takes a heavy emotional toll, not just on me, but my entire family. I feel anxiety and guilt, often because I just can't be the active and engaged person I believe myself to be, especially when I have a flare up. I have to pace myself and my energy, juggling my relationships, my career, my health, and of course, my family, all to manage my disease. I'm sharing my story so that no one feels alone, to raise awareness on the lived experience and the impact of this disease. Arthritis comes in so many shapes and colors. It's painful, it's a fatigue-ridden, and a mobility, independence, mental health, and career-limiting disease at times. And every person's loss is different. And this is why Arthritis Awareness Month and the campaign that's continuing until October 12th is so very important. I invite you to join us at arthritis.ca/steels. We are featuring 16 faces of arthritis, all ages, all across Canada, highlighting what arthritis has stolen from them. But more importantly, you can learn how to take control of your arthritis and advocate for change. Find ways to support innovative research and learn about critical initiatives. Awareness drives change, and I want to be part of the change. Don't you? Together, we can make a real difference and help take back what arthritis has stolen from so many. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana, for helping us raise awareness about this disease. So now let's get to tonight's webinar. And before we get started, just a few logistics. This webinar is best viewed on a laptop or desktop computer. If you have any technical difficulties, please email arthritistalks@arthritis.ca for assistance. If you have a question for our presenter, you can submit it through the Q&A button at the bottom middle of the screen, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible during the hour that we have together. You can click on the chat icon in the bottom middle of the screen to access the chat and connect with other participants, as well as our chat moderator. And if you do find that distracting, you can also close out of it completely. Just click the X icon. To enable closed captioning, click on the Show Captioning icon in your controls toolbar at the bottom of the screen. We have received hundreds of questions each year through our website, Arthritis Line, and Arthritis Talks webinars about how gluten may affect arthritis. Because of the high volume of questions we receive, we decided to bring back an expert, registered dietitian Cristina Montoya, to have an entire Arthritis Talks webinar focused on this topic. Many questions that we received in advance did follow similar themes, so we'll get to those first before we go into a live Q&A at the end of the session. And before we get started, I also want to thank our event partners, Pfizer, United Way Winnipeg, and others for their financial support of our Arthritis Talk series. Now let's get started, and a warm welcome to today's expert, Cristina Montoya. Cristina.
Thank you.
Welcome. Could you start us off tonight by chatting more about what exactly a gluten disorder is?
Well, thank you for inviting me back to this arthritis talks to discuss this important topic that I get questions every single day. What are gluten-related disorders? Well, they encompass a group of conditions which symptoms are triggered by gluten. Now, what is gluten? Gluten is basically the protein found in wheat, rye, and barley. The group is you can see celiac disease, wheat allergy, non-celiac gluten wheat sensitivity, and gluten intolerance. Celiac disease is also an autoimmune disease that when a person consumes gluten, it triggers an immune reaction and then can cause damage to the gut lining. With wheat allergy, we could have an IgE-mediated allergic reaction to the proteins found in wheat. And also we can have an a non-IgE mediated reaction that can occur up to 48 hours later after consuming wheat-containing foods. Then we have the non-celiac gluten or wheat sensitivity is when a person presents like gastrointestinal or extragastrointestinal symptoms after ingesting gluten or other wheat components. And of course, that we have the gluten intolerance that is not intolerance to gluten per se, but the carbohydrates that are present in wheat, barley, and rye.
Okay, so then is gluten intolerance the same as celiac disease?
No, it's not. And the main difference with the gluten intolerance is that there's no damage to the gut lining, and there's no validated diagnostic tools to identify whether there's a non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Whereas in celiac disease, there is damage to the gut lining. As you can see, it's completely flattened on the image on the right side. And that leads to a severe malabsorption of essential nutrients. And most importantly, celiac disease is a serious disease that can increase the risk of colon cancer. When it's not treated, can increase the risk of infertility. So it is a disease that we need to consider and rule out before initiating any treatment with gluten-free diets.
Okay, so I think sorry, I don't know if you wanted to speak to this slide before we go forward. Okay. This next question is likely the most common one that we do receive. And the question here is around different types of inflammatory arthritis. And are they at a higher risk, people who have inflammatory arthritis, a higher risk for developing celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivities?
Well, the research is now very, for all the information that I've reviewed, Sjogren's disease is the rheumatic disease that has the strongest connection with celiac disease. There's indicate that they have an increased risk of developing up to 15% of patients of celiac disease as well. And that it also includes the autoimmune thyroid disease and diabetes. It's important here to recognize that there are different symptoms that occur depending on the gluten related. So for celiac disease, it's also very important to identify. So I think the message that I want you to get through the entire presentation is that a risk of developing another autoimmune disease. So please, before you diet, make sure that the celiac disease or wheat allergy before you start a free diet. There are other fibromyalgia, in the group of the spondyloarthritis have shown some prevalence of non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And they can also experience irritable bowel syndrome. And those with irritable bowel syndrome can have intolerance to FODMAP food, the high FODMAP foods, or those with a fermented. And in this group is included the fructans, and fructans in wheat, barley, and rye. So that's where we can see the overlap in. So when you present non-celiac gluten or wheat sensitivity, we need to really assess, is it the carbohydrates that are causing your symptom, or is it the gluten? And I like to highlight that patients are like a higher risk is a celiac disease and wheat allergy, that they have validated tools to diagnose it. There is celiac disease is a gluten-free diet for life. The wheat allergy with wheat as well, and they need to be assessed by an immunologist. Whereas the non-celiac glutivity, I wouldn't say that even though the symptoms can be bothersome, there's no really evidence that it's causing actual damage to the gut lining. There you go.
Okay, let's get back to this question about whether people with inflammatory arthritis are at higher risk.
They are, like I mentioned, the disease, the rheumatic disease that presents a high risk of developing a gluten-related disorder is Sjogren's disease. But here is, let me see. There is, however, a hypothesis that presents that there is a gut-joint connection, where there is changes in the gut microbiota may cause immune cells to migrate to joints through intestinal permeability, or what people know as a leaky gut, triggering inflammatory reactions. And the culprit of this inflammatory reaction is gliadin, which can activate the immune cells, leading to an inflammatory response. However, all these studies have been done in vitro or animal studies, or they are strongly connected to celiac disease itself. So this hypothesis assumes that since celiac disease and other autoimmune diseases, they share similar genes, it is possible that this genetic load transferred to some gluten toxicity to other autoimmune diseases. But I also want to point out that really up to 40%, even the general population could have these HLA genes, but only like 4% of them can develop celiac disease or could develop rheumatic diseases. So here I'll give you more details into what the research is telling us about the risk of celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity. There was a very interesting review of case reports done in Spain. It was published in the Rheumatología Clínica, a medical journal, where they review a few cases of individuals with spondylitis, ankylosing spondylitis, and fibromyalgia, and a few have rheumatoid arthritis. What they identified with these individuals, they did not have celiac disease, but what they noticed is that if they presented these symptoms like fatigue with unknown etiology, if they have oral yeast, digestive symptoms, iron deficiency anemia, and they also have relatives with celiac disease, they were at high risk of experiencing or developing non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which I thought that was very interesting. Other studies, there have been small studies, but they're very consistent in reporting, again, the Sjogren's disease is the one disease that has an increased prevalence of celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity, that even the Celiac Canada makes note of that on their website. The evidence for rheumatoid arthritis is weak. But since we're talking about gluten-related disorders, remember that one of those gluten-related disorders was also a fructan intolerance. So when you think about that up to 20% or even 30% of individuals with rheumatic diseases may present fibromyalgia, individuals with fibromyalgia can also be at risk of non-celiac gluten sensitivity or fructan intolerance. So that's where we can see the connection with arthritis.
Okay, thank you for that, Cristina. So we have received a number of questions related to gluten challenges. So, what is a gluten challenge and when should somebody consider it?
Well, the gluten challenge is basically reintroducing gluten to your diet. Gluten is essential to, in order for conduct the testing to identify whether you have celiac disease or celiac disease particularly. So what's happening is that there is a trend of many individuals going on a gluten-free diet without assessing the presence of celiac disease. And like I said, there is a risk. Being an autoimmune disease, it poses us at risk of developing other autoimmune diseases. So a gluten challenge is necessary in order to trigger that immune reaction to gluten. So if you're on a gluten-free diet and you get the screening through blood tests or even get a biopsy, it's possible that you're going to get a false negative. So a gluten challenge is essential to make a proper diagnosis. One thing that has changed with the gluten challenge is in a few years, the patients were told to say, no, you need to consume 10 grams of gluten a day for up to 3 months or more in order to get a reaction. So 10 grams of gluten is equivalent to 5 slices of bread a day. So that could be quite a huge amount, especially for someone who has maybe avoided gluten for a long time. So now we have the modified gluten challenge, which is a new approach where they have reduced the gluten from 10 grams to 3 grams per day. And that could be 1.5 slice of bread, half cup of pasta, maybe half cup of shredded wheat, 3-gram cookies. And it doesn't have to be like you have to consume all of them at the same time. You just do like one of these at 3 grams up to 8 weeks, but sometimes you may require more time for the body to react to the gluten.
Thank you for that clarification. So Cristina, with all of that in mind, should people living with arthritis go on a gluten-free diet?
Well, I'm going to answer that with another question. Before starting a gluten-free diet, ask yourself, have you been tested for celiac disease and with allergies, especially if you also have another autoimmune disease? Have you been experiencing digestive symptoms like abdominal pain, bloating, nausea, constipation? And if so, have you been assessed for other gastrointestinal diseases like inflammatory bowel diseases, which also autoimmune disease, and where it's quite connected with ankylosing spondylitis? There are other conditions like functional GI disorders, dyspepsia, and an overlapping of IBS or SIBO, even chronic constipation. You won't believe that chronic constipation can also be a culprit of many digestive symptoms. So I think it's very important for you to ask these questions before you go into a gluten-free diet or just believe any influencer telling you that there is just that connection without even testing for it. So
Yeah, go ahead, Cristina, please.
okay, so there was a question that I really found very interesting. So what foods contain gluten, even the slightest amount? And I know there is this fear that everything contains gluten. And there are certain products it is used. Remember that gluten is it gives a property of elasticity to the products. But there are certain ingredients that they don't necessarily say it's gluten or wheat. So if you see ingredients on your package that says atta, that's used a lot of like South Asian foods, like atta is like the wheat flour, We have farro, farina, semolina. That's an indication that, there is gluten in these products. Even the communion wafers, like I had that experience. I went to my priest and will give me communion wafers, and even the priest tried to give me a gluten-free communion wafers, but there is cross-contamination because he was given the regular wafer to everyone else. So that's just another story. Also, when you look at barley, barley, of course, is it's found in beer, in the brewer's yeast, the malt, and there's hidden sources. Like could be in chocolate. So look at the ingredients: Rice Krispies, Horlicks, Milo, those beverages. Then rye. In oats, specifically, I put gluten-free oats, but it's just the regular oats. So regular oats or oat bran, oat flour, they may contain gluten, not because there's gluten in their products, but it's because there's potential cross-contamination on the fields that they're grown. Let's see what else we have there. Whoops. And also, just to remind you that there's the sources of FODMAP, so those fermentable oligodisaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols is quite a mouthful. Basically, those fermentable carbohydrates that are found in barley, rye, and wheat. But they're also found in other ingredients that are commonly used in many products, like inulin, garlic, and onion, even watermelon at summertime. So is it really maybe the pizza giving you the trouble, or is it all the watermelon that you just had at the summertime? Let's see. Here, there was is there any foods without gluten-related ingredients safe for individuals with celiac disease or with allergies? On this slide, I meant to put all the naturally gluten-free foods that are available out there. So as someone who grew up in Colombia, Colombia and Latin American countries, we are considered a corn-based countries, right? So it's so easy for us to find like a natural gluten-free ingredient. So think of rice, quinoa, corn, legumes, fruits, and vegetables. So they all are gluten-free in nature, so they don't need to be labeled unless there is maybe a risk of cross-contamination if certain products are maybe packaged in a facility that also manipulates or produce wheat-containing products. And I will talk a little bit more about this example, about this product that was recalled in the summer. I'll talk about this one a little bit later. One thing that is to me is fascinating is that one is that gluten-free baked products are not necessarily low FODMAP or like low in fructans, and vice versa. So you will find actually many gluten-free breads that contain fructans because it's in an attempt to give that elasticity that they lose when they remove the gluten from the product. So this product is gluten-free, but it contains fructans containing ingredients such as fava bean and inulin. And then on the other hand, we have low FODMAP products. So this one is particular from, if you've seen this bakery, Cobb's Bread, it's an Australian bakery that they produce or they bake a low-fat loaf. And this is a sourdough bread. They contain gluten ingredients, but here the trick is that they use a fermentation process that helps to break down the fructans of the carbohydrates that are in wheat, barley, and rye. So be very careful when people tell you, or influencers tell you, oh, sourdough bread is gluten-free. It is not. There's gluten in those foods.
Okay, this next question is one that I think a lot about. I have two close friends, a mother-daughter, who have been diagnosed with celiac disease in the last few years, and I find this so tricky and so amazing about what foods have gluten in them when you don't realize it. So How can you tell if a food is really gluten-free?
So one key is that if you go back to the list that I shared with those ingredients that they don't specifically say that it's gluten, but they contain wheat. I think being conscious of that list, it will be very helpful when it comes to nutrition labeling. But also the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and I think we should be very proud of the advocates from Celiac Canada, where they work very hard to get like proper gluten-free labeling in Canada, which is even more strict than in other countries. So in Canada, foods containing less than 20 parts per million of gluten, they do not have to be labeled as containing gluten. However, many times they might just label as a gluten-free, just to kind of give that assurance to the public. But here is a very important things when it comes to claims. So if there's no gluten-free or no gluten containing ingredients, then it is a safe product to consume. Then if it says like it's a gluten-free claim, then it's safe to eat. And if there's a gluten-free claim and a may contain wheat claim, and here is a tricky because you will say, oh, but it contains wheat, so it shouldn't be safe for celiacs. But what they said is like remember that we need less than 20 parts per million. So if the manufacturer can guarantee that there's less than 20 parts per million of gluten, even though it might have been produced in a facility where they kind of manipulate some wheat products, but they'll have to guarantee that they have less than 20 parts per million. So when the products are like the Canadian products, I find that they are safer. Products also that come from Australia, they're very conscious when it comes to gluten-free labeling. And I also want to give you another example is there are many products out there that they go through voluntary labeling. So in this product, it's from a company called Body, and they make products that are low in FODMAPs. That includes low in fructans. So they not only make it gluten-free, but they also make it IBS friendly or low in FODMAP. And as you can see in the ingredient list, they really very specifically list that they use gluten-free oats. So nutrition like reading nutrition labels makes it very is essential for you to make sure that you're safe when consuming gluten-free products. So here's like I bring back this example of the labeling practices that can vary from one country to another. So if you're following a gluten-free diet, especially if you have a celiac disease, you want to also check, and you're traveling, you want to check what are the labeling practices in those countries. These product, the Aussie Bites, they are a very popular gluten-free product that it was available in Costco. But in June of 2024, it was recalled because the product contained gluten that was not declared on the label. And there are a few cues in this product. And one, this product is from the US. And so that's when the differences in labeling comes into place. They reported that they have organic rolled oats, but they didn't specify that they were gluten-free oats. They also say that it may contain, that it was produced in a facility that may contain wheat. So here there's no really that assurance that it's completely gluten-free. So be very wary when it comes to foods that come from other countries. Yeah, oh, let's see. What does a day look like on a gluten-free diet? Well, now with the explosion, so I get the benefits of all the talk on the buzz about gluten-free diets is that we have more gluten-free options than we did even 10 years ago. But in my In my case, I've been collaborating with the Arthritis Society since 2020 and developing recipes featuring anti-inflammatory and antioxidant ingredients. And like I said, growing up, I had access to all these gluten-free products. So for me, it's very easy to use, like cassava flour, plantains, and legumes, quinoa, and rice. And so many of the recipes that I developed for the Arthritis Society are gluten-free. So I would want to give you an example of what a day, what a menu looks like on a gluten-free diet. And this also is a menu that is low in FODMAPs. So if you're either like celiac, if you have celiac disease, or you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, or have fructose intolerance, this type of menu is safe for you. And not only that, it can give you also 35 grams of fiber, which is what you need in a day to promote gut health. And here's an example of the recipes that are available on arthritis.ca. And you can create your own menu. I do have this simple like veggie frittata, chipotle burrito. Of course, I'm Latina, so I have to put the beans somewhere there. Spicy shrimp stir fry was inspired by my mother-in-law. She's Pakistani, so she taught me how to make that. Used with lots of turmeric and great antioxidant, anti-inflammatory ingredients, gluten-free date and carrot muffins, and also beverages that are gluten-free.
Thanks so much, Cristina. Your recipes are delicious for our audience. The next question here around, are there any nutritional risks that people should be aware of if they want to follow a gluten-free diet?
Absolutely. We need to consider that gluten-free diets tend to be higher in saturated fats, and sugar, and salt, and lower in protein and fiber, and also other essential vitamins and minerals. So we know for many of the wheat-containing products and cereals, they must be fortified with folic acid and iron. That's not really a guarantee for gluten-free products. Also, because of that, there could be a risk of a low intake of essential minerals and vitamins. So like iron, calcium, antioxidants, folates, and B complex vitamins. So sometimes I heard many patients like, I go on a gluten-free diet and I'm still so tired. And I'm always thinking, so I wonder if you're maybe developing an iron deficiency anemia, or you are actually developing some nutritional deficiencies that you need to address that really have nothing to do with gluten. Another risk is that when you avoid like fructose type resistant starches, so like we said, type of like inulin or oligofructose, or even the wheat, barley, and rye, they may increase the risk of gut dysbiosis. So there is this imbalance with the gut bacteria that can also cause problems. And nowadays, that we all know, and we're all seeing that maybe living the impact of high cost foods, and especially when it comes to gluten-free products, they are so expensive. They can be 500% higher. One loaf of gluten-free bread that was maybe $4 a year ago is now almost $10. So in this case, I highly suggest, if you need to go on a gluten-free diet, try to choose those foods that are naturally gluten-free.
Now, what about other food intolerances? Are they common with people living with arthritis?
See. Yes, so before we even discuss this, I want to make a difference. Like we have food intolerances, food sensitivities, and food allergies. And many times the people just use those terms like interchangeably, like they're the same, and they're not the same. When we speak about like food intolerance, I think about like a certain like tolerance. So think of a bucket that you are just filling and filling and filling, and it overflows. And that's when you present symptoms. And one example is lactose intolerance. As we grow older, we lose the ability, or actually the enzyme that breaks down the lactose. It starts to decrease, is not as efficient. So many adults experience lactose intolerance. So that's one example. Then we have sensitivity, and food sensitivity still to this day is a very non-specific term. And the most common type of sensitivity that we see is the non-celiac gluten or wheat sensitivity, which I explained. The exposure to specific foods may create an immune reaction. And many times, like I said, many influencers or other non-regulated healthcare practitioners, they love to recommend and to order food sensitivity tests. And these food sensitivity tests, I learned that even the Canadian Society of Allergy and Clinical Immunology, they advise against these food sensitive tests because there's no scientific validation for them. And many times what they test is the food exposure. So it's going to tell you, you need to eliminate, dairy, gluten, but these are all the foods that you have been exposed at some point. So that is not reliable. So I advised, that's something I never recommend to my clients. Also consider that food sensitivities can fade away with time due to our changing immune system and gut microbiome. And as we learned, food allergy, it's often IgE-mediated immune response. It usually is related to a protein component, and that's what, since, when we're growing up, when we're having our children, they always advise us to be aware of the 8 main food allergens, like milk, egg, peanuts, tree nuts, and fish. So I just wanted to clarify that. So then you understand what is a food intolerance, sensitivity, or food allergy. Now, there are what are possible potential like food intolerances that people with arthritis may have. And like I mentioned, one very common could be lactose intolerance. So one, if you also have celiac disease, patients with celiac disease often experience lactose intolerance. If you have fibromyalgia, you may also have intolerance to lactose. And I wanted to bring up this slide. So there is an app, where they can help us identify the foods that are high in FODMAPs. And so as you can see, not all products containing dairy, they're going to cause like lactose intolerance. If you can see on this list, most types of cheese, the people even with lactose intolerance can tolerate, and it's because they have the bacteria culture that helps to break down the lactose into more like digestible pieces. But it's also very interesting that people will go, oh no, I won't drink milk, but I'm gonna have oat milk. But when you have oat milk, there is a higher amount of fructans. And it's not even related to the lactose, it's the fructans. When it comes to soy milk, if the soy milk comes from soy protein, it's safe, it's low in FODMAP or low in fructans. But if it comes from soybean, it is high in fructans. So when it comes to food intolerances, the guidance by a registered dietitian becomes so important because it's so unique to your needs. Let's see, I do have more. We can't miss the nightshade vegetables, right? And so do they affect your arthritis symptoms? And they do not. Like, there's no strong scientific evidence supporting the nightshade vegetables affect your arthritis symptoms. The nightshades, I always said, include commonly consumed fruits, vegetables, and spices, which are rich in antioxidants, polyphenols, and fiber. So these are the ones that we consider like part of an anti-inflammatory way of eating. The two I will say that maybe the two potential foods that can cause some reactions are potatoes and tomatoes. And potatoes, only if you find those potatoes that have like the green skin, they have more concentrations of solanine, which is that the hypothesis that I increase consumption of solanine is what is going to cause have a reaction. But chances are that you're not going to eat lots of green potatoes. With tomatoes, there is more than solanine when it comes to tomatoes. And in my experience with many clients, they do react to tomatoes, but I feel that what I see is more related to other reasons, not because they're nightshades. And I'll give you an example. This is another type of, it's kind of emerging. There's a lot of we still don't understand about histamine intolerance, but this is like another popular diet that is getting to the autoimmune community. So histamine is a molecule that activates histamine receptors throughout the body. So it is necessary for us for alertness, for blood flow, for inflammations and allergic reactions. So we need histamine. The body is constantly producing histamine for gut health, for gut function, heart function, brain function. So it's constantly producing histamine. It needs it. But then there's these some studies, I would say like I'm more into the in vitro animal studies saying that certain individuals are at higher risk of having a deficiency in a specific enzyme like the DAO or the diamine oxidase, that this enzyme helps to break down histamine at the gut level. So there is this hypothesis that some individuals are like deficient in this enzyme. But then the histamine intolerance, then they say, is characterized by the accumulation of histamine to a point that exceeds the body's capacity to eliminate it. And so this is where I bring the example of the bucket, is that when there is this overflow of certain substances, that's when it triggers reactions. There are certain foods that could, they naturally contain histamine, and one of those foods are tomatoes. So like I said, it was not because it was a nightshade, it's because it could have like histamine, and can also stimulate the production of histamine when it's consumed. But again, histamine intolerance, there has this potential because it involves the immune system. So individuals with autoimmune diseases, including the inflammatory arthritis, they could have the risk of reaction of histamine intolerance. But I highly recommend you to go to an immunologist to get properly assessed, because there's no validated test to diagnose this condition.
That's wonderful, Cristina. I am just mindful of the time and we want to get to some questions at the end, but just quickly to bring this all together, what are your top 10 tips here?
Yeah, so it's very important to, specifically for those with celiac disease, to just stick to the strict gluten-free diet. If you need the guidance from a registered dietitian, just please reach out to one that understands gluten-related disorders. Like I explained, check food labels, avoid cross-contamination in the kitchen. It's so common that maybe you're on a gluten-free diet, but the rest of your family are not. So like keeping your food separate from the gluten-containing foods, and maybe separate cupboards, making sure maybe you have a separate toaster. Just take those precautions. Then you want to, when eating out, like call the restaurants in advance, check their menus, ask about food preparations also, just to ensure there's no cross-contamination, and also ensure that there's a balanced and nutrient-rich diet. Let's see, make sure that you always get your checkups. If you have celiac disease, make sure that there is no triggers, and that you get your blood test to make sure that there is that the gluten-free diet is actually working for you. Stay informed and about celiac disease and educate family. Like I said, consult with a registered dietitian to prevent nutritional deficiencies. It's important to connect with support groups that are well informed, but not to alarm you. Just making sure that they're safe and reputable. Be aware of labeling like gluten friendly, which I don't even understand if it's gluten free. How is it gluten friendly? Gluten smart or gluten aware, which are typically used in many restaurants. But probably the best advice is when in doubt, leave it out.
Okay, amazing. You know what? I think if it's okay with you, Cristina, I think I might go to some of the questions that we just received tonight. And I think some of this might actually come up in the Q&A if I can take that liberty. So maybe we'll just advance a few slides to the Q&A. But first question here from several people is, are the tips that you talked about tonight, are they relevant to just inflammatory forms of arthritis, or would they also be relevant to people living with osteoarthritis?
They are mostly relevant to inflammatory arthritis. And remember that most of the studies, they try to compare it to celiac disease. And celiac disease is an autoimmune disease. So there are not a lot of reports or research conducted on people with osteoarthritis, unless you also have fibromyalgia and live with irritable bowel syndrome. That's where there's a potential that a low FODMAP diet or a diet low in fructans can be effective for you. But everything else, I would say that is mostly related to inflammatory arthritis.
Okay. A number of questions came in about dairy. Could you just comment a little bit about what we know between the relationship between dairy and arthritis?
Yeah, just like the Nightshades, the research is not very there's not very strong to say that dairy is inflammatory. However, sorry, I'm a little dry from my Sjogren's.
No problem at all. We understand.
Thank you. Okay, so with dairy, when studies that have done in healthy individuals, they have actually shown that when people consume like Greek yogurt before a meal, it reduces gut inflammation, which is very interesting. But then there's also some research indicating that it depends on the type of protein that is in the milk or dairy products. So then we have what is called the A1 casein, which has shown to be more inflammatory. And then we have the A2 casein, which is less inflammatory. And this protein is more abundant in goat's milk. So that's why so many people may tolerate goat's milk instead of cow's milk. But there is also the grass-fed cow's milk tends to have more concentrations of A2 casein type of protein. And there's actually a product called A2 milk. But I typically don't see that research that's just strong enough to say you have arthritis, you have to eliminate dairy products. I'll probably say that the strongest connection is because we lose the efficiency of our lactose, the lactose enzyme, or the enzyme that breaks lactose, and then we may actually experience just some lactose intolerance.
Okay. You mentioned FODMAP a few times, I think, in your presentation, and we had a number of people just asking, could you explain a little bit more about what that is for people who may not be familiar with that?
Okay, so the FODMAPs, and I said the mouthful. So they're basically fermentable carbohydrates that they're not digested in the small intestine, and they go straight to the colon, and they're fermented by our gut bacteria. So for people who are very sensitive to these high FODMAP foods, they tend to the fermentation can cause excess gas production. It can also draw water into the large intestine, causing diarrhea. or older individuals can actually present with constipation and abdominal pain. So what the research is saying about the FODMAP is that people react mostly to fructans containing products. So remember, the fructans are in rye, wheat, and barley. And so if you were to avoid the fructans, so most gluten-free products or gluten-free breads, they are also low in FODMAP, so maybe that's one way to get around it. The other FODMAP that it can cause some reactions is the sugar alcohols. So if you think about like xylitol, sorbitol, even the polyols or type of sugar alcohols that are found in avocado, mushrooms, people can react to those as well. So to identify, like honestly, I can give you a whole talk about fermentable carbohydrates. But what is important for you to understand that it's that the low FODMAP diet specifically has been studied with individuals with irritable bowel syndrome. It has shown that it works for 50 to 80% of people, but that also means that it doesn't work for 20 to 50% of the people that causes. So that's why the guidance with a registered dietitian is so important, to identify what are your actual triggers.
So that actually leads into my next question very well, which is what kind of healthcare professionals should people be seeking out when they think they have concerns?
I would say that when it comes to this celiac disease, making sure that with your physician or immunologist to rule out celiac disease, I think that's the most important thing, or gastroenterologist, I would say. The gastroenterologist is an important healthcare provider when it comes to diagnosing like celiac disease. In non-celiac gluten sensitivity, it could be a collaboration between your physician and your dietitian, because like I said, there's no validated test to tell you, oh, you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. For allergies, it's very important to see an immunologist and to not attempt to do a food challenge on your own, because if you're actually presenting a reaction to wheat protein, you don't want to be alone. You want to be in a controlled environment. So think about these. So you want to think about a gastroenterologist, about the immunologist, your kind of family physician. I wouldn't say rheumatologist that much, because I educate my rheumatologist a lot on these conditions. But I would say those.
Yeah, that's great. So those challenge tests, a couple questions here about how accurate are they?
They're not. Like I said, like they're like the food sensitivity test. And what they test is really more about the exposure to foods. And so they are not reliable. I'm honestly telling you, you're probably wasting $400 or $500 that you could use somewhere else, or maybe just purchasing high quality foods. I want many times, and I've seen many patients, like chronic constipation can be the culprit of so many things, of so many symptoms. And maybe something just, I wouldn't say simple, because treating constipation is not simple. But what if we get to the root cause of those digestive symptoms?
Right. Okay, a question here about how do you get enough fiber if you have a gluten-free diet?
The best thing to get more fiber is to go for the foods that are naturally gluten-free. So if you go for the grains like quinoa, corn, they are high in fiber. Legumes, they're also like beans and lentils. And again, go back to the arthritis.ca because we had lots of that in there. It's a great way. Fruits and vegetables, they're all gluten-free. So in fact, many times when people go on a gluten-free diet, and because the gluten-free products are so expensive, they tend to go and use more of these kind of natural foods that are gluten-free. And what that means that you're adding more fiber, more antioxidants, more anti-inflammatory components into your diet, and that makes you feel better. And overall, you feel, oh, it was because it was the gluten-free diet, but maybe it was because you made just these overall changes that had the impact and not the gluten.
Very interesting. Okay, so a question here, a clarification around product labeling in Canada. So do wheat and gluten sources, must they be clearly labeled in Canada?
Yes, so if they are gluten-free, they must be labeled. So you should see it, you should see the gluten-free. But there is one specification. If it's like, again, if it's a natural, if you get rice, they're not going to say it's gluten-free because it's just naturally gluten-free. But if you get like the rice that it might require some processing, or like the microwavable rice, then you might want to check on those ingredients because there might be some cross-contamination depending on where it was manufactured.
Okay. A question here about how long does gluten stay in your body? So if you've had an accidental exposure, somebody's wondering how long it will sort of stick around for.
Well, think about the gastrointestinal transit. If you have a normal gastrointestinal transit, it could take up to 48 hours to get completely out of your system, provided that you have like regular, like bowel regularity. If you have constipation, it might stay longer in your system.
Okay. And then a few questions here about, is there a relationship that you know of between gluten intolerance and Crohn's disease, gluten intolerance and gout? Any commentary there that you could share?
I understand when it comes to the inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, it might be a stronger connections with the non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Not so much with gout.
Okay.
And remember, because Crohn's disease is also an autoimmune disease, so that's where the connection could be.
Okay. I think I have time for one last question. I think you did actually have some slides prepared, so you thought of this already, but what excites you about the future of research here in this area?
Oh, yeah, I wanted to share that. It was just a research that was conducted in Sweden, and I absolutely loved it because it wasn't just about diet. It was interdisciplinary lifestyle program that was for individuals with rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis. And they ran this program for approximately 2 years, right before the pandemic, and it included a plant-based diet, which was guided by a dietitian. They received cooking classes. It was just amazing. They also have physiotherapists guiding the physical therapy for 3 days a week with aerobic exercise and 2 days with strength training. And they also have psychotherapy. So I will say that this trial incorporated like the 3 Ps that I would like to see in a lifestyle program. So plant-based, physiotherapy, and psychotherapy. And the psychotherapy was so important for the participants to adhere to all these changes, because I think that's where we learn about all the diet, but can we follow through for months at a time? That's when we get our patients lost. It's just the consistency. They did acknowledge that in order to do this type of trials, people needed to be very committed. They have like high literacy rates in order to understand the program. But I think it was very exciting just to see one that a lifestyle program that it was entirely focused to rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis, and it also showed improvement in a lot of metabolic markers. So their blood pressure dropped, inflammatory markers also improved, and even most remarkable is after 1 year, they decreased the amount of medications for pain when it came to the participants with osteoarthritis. And for the rheumatoid arthritis group, they actually increased the immunosuppressants. They use immunosuppressants. So I thought that was so exciting. I wanted to share it.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Cristina. Thank you again so much for sharing all of your knowledge with us today. We do want to take just a few moments to get the audience's feedback on the presentation. So for those of you who are watching on Zoom, you should see a poll question pop up on your screen with a few answer options. So just click on the response that does reflect your thoughts. We'll also be sending you an evaluation form when we email the recording and the slides. So if you weren't able to access that poll question, don't worry. You will have the opportunity to give us feedback at that time. And we really, really do value your input because we use the survey feedback to shape our future arthritis talk series. Once again, we are so grateful to Pfizer, United Way Winnipeg, and our other partners for their financial support of this event. As mentioned earlier in the session, September is Arthritis Awareness Month, and we need your help. Please consider making a donation to support initiatives like Arthritis Talks. We truly rely on the generosity of people like you to help the 1 in 5 people in Canada affected by arthritis. Just as importantly, your support helps us fund critical research that brings us closer to finding a cure. This month, there's an exciting opportunity to make an even bigger difference thanks to the Raymond Chang Foundation. Every dollar you donate until midnight on September 30th will be matched, doubling your impact. So to donate, simply click the link in the chat or scan the QR code on your screen. Every dollar really does make a difference, and together we can help take back what arthritis has stolen. This concludes tonight's Arthritis Talks. We will be back on October 16th for Arthritis Talks, Knee Arthritis. On behalf of all of us, thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, please stay well.